Hello my gorgeous friends of Webflow, it's your friendly neighborhood Francesco from Supasaido here. In the last episode, we built the desktop structure of Webflow's navbar and nav menu. No mega menu yet, just the foundation. Today we're picking up exactly where we left off. And in this tutorial, we're going to turn that static desktop layout into a fully responsive navigation system. One that works seamlessly across tablets, phones, and every quirky viewport in between. We'll go step by step, debugging a few layout issues along the way and explore some key topics like how and when to use units like VH and DVH, what happens when you choose the wrong one and how to fix it, and how to deal with the infamous mobile browser that loves to break your layout. And to add a little professional polish, we'll write just a few lines of CSS to lock page scroll whenever the menu is open. So users stay focused and nothing scrolls away in the background. If you're looking forward to it as much as I am, stick around, and if you find my videos helpful and want to support my work, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. But now, if you're ready, let's dive in. This is exactly where we left off in the previous episode, and today what we want to do is move from, well, this, and especially from this beautifully broken mobile menu right here in our Webflow project to this navbar, and more importantly, this mobile nav menu. We're still ignoring the mega menus for now, and instead we'll focus on making the layout responsive and improving a few rough spots, like those bottom buttons that are awkwardly cut off. It looks like the nav menu is larger than the available space in the viewport, but one thing at a time. Let's jump back into our project and begin by moving the menu button from the left side of the navbar to the right. We'll start by giving it a class, navbar_menu-button. Now, if we click on the navbar content wrapper, we can see that its display property is set to flex. So we have two main options for aligning the menu button to the right side of the container. One, we could change the justification from left to space between. Two, we could simply apply margin left auto to the menu button. That second one will automatically push it to the far right of its parent. So yeah, let's go with that. We'll also, without any real reason honestly, update the padding of the menu button from the default 18 pixels to 1 rem. And just a quick reminder, you can hold Shift and press Enter to apply the same value to all sides at once. We won't touch the icon for now, because we're going to replace it with a load animation in one of the next episodes, just like Webflow does on their website, to get that smooth open-close effect when toggling the menu. Before we dive into adjusting the nav menu itself, let's take care of this contact sales link. If we go back to the desktop breakpoint, we'll notice that this link only exists inside the nav menu, which means that on tablet view it's not visible unless we open the mobile menu. But on the Webflow site, we can actually see two versions of this contact sales link. One inside the nav menu, visible only when the menu is open, and one outside, directly placed inside the navbar. This second one doesn't appear on desktop, it's shown only on tablet and smaller screens. So how do we do that? Let's switch back to desktop view, select the contact sales link and duplicate it with Command or Control D. Then we move the duplicate outside of the nav menu, placing it right after the navbar brand. Now let's give this nav link a combo class, something like cc-mobile, short for combo class mobile. In the desktop breakpoint, we'll set its display to none, so it's hidden there. Then in the tablet breakpoint, we switch the display back to flex. Great, but this still doesn't look like the version we see on Webflow site. First of all, the contact sales link on Webflow has an underline applied to it, and our doesn't. And, more importantly, the vertical padding is way too much. Right now it's at 1.5 REMs, inherited from the desktop styles. So let's first reduce it to 1.25 REMs, top and bottom. You can use Option or Alt plus Enter to update both values at the same time. There's also the hover effect still applied to the link, not ideal for mobile devices since hover doesn't exist there, but we'll clean that up later when we work on the full nav menu responsiveness. Let's focus now on the underline. At first glance, it might look like there's already an underline applied, but it's definitely not visible, and that's probably just a kind of leftover from the default navlink component we used at the start. So let's manually reapply it and match the look from Webflow's site. We click these three dots next to text decoration, set the color to dark black, and change the thickness to 2 pixels. And also adjust the offset to, let's say, 0.25 REMs. That offset looks pretty good, so let's go with it. Now we still have an alignment issue. Right now, the link is sitting dead center inside the Navbar content wrapper, which is a flex container. If we inspect it, we'll notice that Webflow has applied left and right margins of around 150 pixels, but even if we remove those, the link jumps all the way to the left, just after the Navbar brand. What we want is to position it on the right side, just before the menu button. So, same trick as before, right? We select the nav link and apply margin left auto. But now it ends up somewhere in the middle of the navbar once again. Why? When using flexbox, applying margin left auto to 2 elements in the same row causes a sort of conflict. Each one is trying to push itself away from the previous element, but since both are pushing from the left, they end up distributing the space between them instead of stacking to the right. In our case, both the contact sales link and the menu button have margin left auto, so the space gets shared and they don't align as we'd expect. To fix it, we simply remove the margin left auto from the menu button and boom, the contact sales link shifts right next to it. The gap between them is now created by the gap property of the Navbar content wrapper, and that spacing looks just fine. So, with that done, it's finally time to tackle the most annoying, okay, maybe just most tedious part of this whole thing. Making the nav menu responsive. To open it, we click the menu button and then go into the element settings panel under the navbar settings section and click show. And yeah, just as expected, we've got a lot of fixing ahead of us. So let's roll up our sleeves and get started. Let's start with something simple, the menu button. If you look closely, the background color and icon color of the menu button change when the menu is opened. To understand what's going on, select the element and check the style panel. If we click on a different element first, like the icon, and then click back on the menu button, we'll see a small green label appear next to the class name. It says open, which means we're currently looking at the open state of the button, the one that's active when the nav menu is open. But we don't want this state to look any different. We want the background and icon color to match the default closed state. So, with the menu button still selected, go to the background section and type transparent to override the default color Webflow assigns. Then scroll to typography to set the text color, which also affects the icon, and choose the dark black variable. Done. That's much better. Now let's move on to the actual nav menu. First things first, we need to make sure the nav menu expands to take up the full available space. And we also need to switch its layout from horizontal to vertical, so the links are stacked like in the Webflow site. Let's select the nav menu and in the style panel, try setting its height to 100 VH. But we can see that something's off. The nav menu ends up overflowing the viewport, and that's because we're ignoring the height of the navbar itself. Right now, the navbar is taking up space in addition to the nav menu, so the two together exceed 100% of the viewport height. What we actually want is for the nav menu to occupy only the remaining space beneath the navbar. No more, no less. So, how do we figure that out? We need to subtract the height of the navbar from 100 VH. But what's the height of the navbar? Great question. Let's temporarily delete the navbar brand and the menu button to see what happens. And interestingly, the height of the navbar barely changes. Even with just the contact sales link remaining, the height seems to stay the same. And once we delete the nav link too, the navbar disappears completely. So we can safely say that the height of the navbar is determined by that nav link. Let's figure out exactly how tall it is. The vertical padding on the link is 1.25 REMs, top and bottom. That's 2.5 REMs total. The font size is defined using a clamp function. So clamp and between parentheses 0.875 REMs, the minimum value, 1.11 VW, the actual value, and 1 REM, the maximum value. We're currently working in the tablet breakpoint, where the maximum width is 991 pixels. So let's do some quick math to find out how much 1.11 VW actually is at that size. So 991 divided by 100 equals 9.91 pixels, that's one viewport width. So 1.11 viewport width equals 9.91 times 1.11 equals 11 pixels. That means the font size at this breakpoint would resolve to 11 pixels. Now, in most browsers, 1 REM equals 16 pixels, based on the root font size. So, 11 pixels equals 11 divided 16 equals 0.6875 REMs, which is less than the lower limit of the clamp function we're using, which is 0.875 REMs. So the actual font size that gets applied here is the minimum, 0.875 REMs. But that's the font size, not the total line height. We also have a line height of 1.2, which means the total text height is 0.875 REMs times 1.2 equals 1.05 REMs. Now we just add that to the padding, and so finally we have 1.05 REMs plus 2.5 REMs equals 3.55 REMs. So the navbar's total height is 3.55 REMs. Now that we know this, let's go back to the nav menu. Scroll to the height property, click the purple dot to use variables and select calc. We'll type calc and between parentheses 100 VH minus 3.55 REMs. And just like that, the overflow is gone. No more white space or scrolling issues in the canvas. We've now successfully made the nav menu fill the remaining viewport space. Before we move on to adjusting the layout, let's change the background color of the menu. With the nav menu selected, choose the white variable from the list. And we're good to go. Let's now fix the layout inside the nav menu. What we need to do is switch it from a horizontal layout to a vertical one. Fortunately, this part is pretty straightforward. We already have a wrapper inside the nav menu called Navbar link group, which contains all the main links and dropdowns. Its display is set to flex, with the default direction, row. Let's change the direction from horizontal to vertical. Click the vertical option and there we go. It's already starting to look a bit more like the menu we see on the Webflow site. Still not quite there, but definitely a solid starting point. Now, if we click on one of the list items inside the Navbar link group, we'll notice that they only take up the space they need, just enough for the text and icons inside. But on Webflow's site, each item expands to fill the full horizontal width of the menu. To do the same, let's go back to the Navbar link group and change the align setting from center to stretch. This will force the children, the list items, to stretch across the full width, and that works. But the links inside are still center aligned. Let's click one of the drop downs inside a list item. Its display is set to inline block, which is what's causing it to only take up as much space as needed. We'll change that to block and voila, it now stretches the full width. Now we'll deal with the simple nav links. Click on one and under typography, you'll see that text alignment is set to center. That's inherited from the desktop breakpoint. We just changed that to left and we're done. Let's pause here for a second. We'll come back to those bottom links and the CTA button later. They have a different layout and require a separate approach. Let's now move the arrow icon inside the drop-down toggles to the right side of the container, just like on Webflow site. Click on a drop-down toggle, set its display property from inline flex to flex, so that it's free to take up all the available space inside its parent container, with horizontal alignment set to left. We simply change it to space between, and the arrow jumps to the far right. Perfect. Now let's add some breathing room. We don't want the text or icons to be stuck against the edges of the screen. So select a drop-down toggle and add 1.25 REMs of horizontal padding. Again, you can press Alt or Option plus Enter to apply the same value on both sides. This update will apply to all drop-downs using the same class. Do the same for a regular nav link. Select it and set the horizontal padding to 1.25 REMs. Now, you'll notice that the contact sales link in the navbar, the one outside the menu, also inherits this padding. That's because it uses the same base class. To fix this, select the contact sales link outside the menu and use the combo class we previously added, cc-mobile, to override its horizontal padding back to 0. Now let's remove the gap between all the menu items. Select the navbar link group, scroll to the gap setting. It's currently using a clump function. Click the value, then click the reset icon and set the value to 0. Done. We'll come back to the hover effect later, but for now let's add a bottom border to each menu item, except for the last one. This border is applied to the navbar link list item. Let's grab the color directly from Webflow site using the dev tools and then select one of the list items, scroll to the border section, add 1 pixel bottom border and paste the color. Now to remove the border from the last item, let's just add a combo class to this last item like cc-last and override the bottom border color and set it to transparent. Let's take a quick look again at Webflow's menu. Aside from hover effects and color tweaks, this structure now matches quite nicely. However, there's still an issue. The menu button icon is not aligned with the drop-down icons. Also, the Navbar brand logo isn't perfectly aligned with the link text on the left. Why? It's mostly due to padding, and we're getting it from two places: the Navbar main container and the menu button itself. In the first episode, we had applied a clump function to the container's horizontal padding. For this breakpoint, let's simplify things. Instead of adjusting the padding for every menu item to match the container, we'll just go the other way around and update the Navbar main container. So, select the Navbar main container, click on the padding value to open the pop-up, hit the reset icon, Set the horizontal padding to 1.25 REMs and use Alt or Option plus Enter to apply it to both sides. Now let's deal with the menu button. First, set the right padding of the container to 0. Then select the menu button. It currently has 1 REM padding all around. We want to change only the horizontal padding to 1.25 REMs. But wait, we're still looking at the open state of the button. If we change the padding now, it will apply only to the open state. Let's do it anyway for now and see what happens. Set both left and right padding to 1.25 REMs. Now try opening and closing the menu. You'll see the icon jumps slightly when toggling. That's because the padding is different between the two states. So here's what we do. Reset the padding values applied to the open state. In the side selector, click on the inheriting orange label and then on Navbar menu button, the one for the tablet breakpoint, without the open state. And set the horizontal padding to 1.25 REM here instead. Now we go back, close and reopen the menu and the icon no longer jumps. Everything stays aligned and the padding is consistent between states. And as a bonus, this also fixes the alignment between the menu icon and the drop-down icons. Before we dive into the whole VH, SVH, DVH situation, and before taking care of actually removing hover interactions, let's first take care of this last section of our nav menu, the group of 3 links that, if we look closely at Webflow site, actually look like buttons. Because, well, at the end of the day, buttons are just styled links anyway. Let's start by selecting the Navbar link group. Careful though, we actually have 2 instances of this class in the page. One is used for the main list of links and dropdowns, and the other is for this group of 3 buttons. Since the main list is now laid out vertically, we don't want to mess that up by changing the direction of all Navbar link group elements. So instead, we'll just add a combo class to this second one. Let's call it cc-2. So combo class 2, because we're creative like that. Then change the flex direction from vertical to horizontal, and the vertical alignment from stretch to center, to make sure the buttons are nicely aligned. Now let's fix the spacing between the elements, which is all over the place. That's because Webflow has sneakily applied default margins to the nav links, which we really don't need. So select one of the Navbar nav link elements inside this group, set the left margin to 0 and press Alt or Option plus Enter to apply it on both sides. Much better. But all items are now aligned to the left. So to distribute them evenly across the container, just go back to the Navbar link group, the one with the cc2 combo class, and change the horizontal alignment to space between. Also, to give the group some breathing room from the edges of the screen, set the horizontal padding to 1.25 REMs. Now, the first 2 links on the left might still look a bit off, but that's just because they have internal padding and don't look like a button yet. So let's fix that. Select the first Navbar nav link in this group, add a combo class called cc-button-mobile to give it a button-like appearance only on mobile breakpoints, and let's reuse some of the styles from the Navbar CTA button. As for the padding, the CTA's vertical padding is 1 REM. And let's also set the horizontal padding to 1.25 REMs, just like we've used for everything else. And apply these values to the button link with the cc-button-mobile class as well. And onto this element, let's also set the border radius to 4 pixels. For the border itself, instead of using the border property, which affects element dimensions, we'll use an inner box shadow to simulate a border. But first, let's deal with a leftover inner shadow we applied in episode 1, which created an underline on hover. Since we're on mobile and don't care about hover effects, we can safely remove this inner shadow from the base Navbar navlink class inside the tablet breakpoint. Once that's done, go back to the cc-button-mobile and add a new inner box shadow, x0, y0, blur 0 and size 1, and use the border color from Webflow's site. That's it. The link now looks like a proper button. Apply the same combo class to the middle link and we're getting pretty close. Now, the CTA button is still a bit visually odd next to these newly styled buttons. That outer shadow is not doing it any favors. Also, we have a little text alignment issue. The text is left aligned inside these button links. That's because the base Navbar navlink class has text align left for the main link list. Since we have a combo class, we can safely override this to center. For consistency, let's remove the outer box shadow from the Navbar CTA as well. If we want all three buttons to grow and share the available space equally, let's select each one, CTA and both button links, and under FlexChild sizing, choose grow if possible. When all Flex children have grow if possible, they will evenly divide any extra space inside the container. If there's unused space, each item grows to fill it proportionally. And since the grow value is equal, they all take up the same width. That's why the buttons now look equal and symmetrical. Now they're looking good, but there's no spacing between them. Let's fix that. Select the Navbar link group, the one with cc-2 combo class, and add a gap of 1.25 REMs. There's just one last thing. We want this Navbar link group to appear at the bottom of the nav menu. And unfortunately, that's going to be a bit trickier than it seems. Now, moving that second Navbar link group to the bottom of the nav menu might sound easy, and technically it should be. After all, the nav menu is a flexbox, right? So we'd expect that if we select the second and last element inside it and simply apply a margin top auto, that should push it all the way down. Because in a flex container, if you apply margin top auto to an item and there's available space, that margin will grow to fill the remaining space, effectively pushing the item to the bottom. So yes, this trick normally works. But it doesn't work here. Why not? Because when the menu is open, Webflow forces the nav menu to use display block, even though it looks like a flexbox in the designer. So in practice, it's not behaving like a real flexbox anymore. To fix this, we need a little workaround. We'll wrap the contents of the nav menu, those two link groups, in a new div block. At first glance, everything might look the same. But remember, adding a new element like this affects all breakpoints, not just the one we're working in, because this is a change in the HTML structure, not just in styles. So, if we go back to the desktop breakpoint, we'll see that our changes have caused a mess. That's because previously, everything was directly inside the nav menu, which had all the layout properties we needed. Display flex, gap, alignment, sizing, etc. Now we need to transfer those properties, some of them, from the nav menu to our new inner wrapper, because that's the element we'll be styling from now on. Here's how to do it properly. Assign the nav menu class to the inner wrapper. We're just borrowing its styles for now. Duplicate it as a new class and call it navbar underscore nav-menu-inner-wrapper. Now remove all the typography related styles, hover state styles, and keep what we actually need. So display flex, gap, sizing, and now go back to the original nav menu and remove the display flex property, but keep the sizing. We still want the nav menu to stretch and fill the available space in the navbar content wrapper. If we remove that, the menu shrinks and breaks the layout. If we go back to the tablet breakpoint and open the menu again, we'll see the result. The second navbar link group is now sitting nicely at the bottom. The margin trick, margin top auto, finally works, because the parent is a real Flex container. But something else broke. Both groups are now laid out horizontally, not vertically. That's because the new inner wrapper inherited a row direction by default. So let's switch that to column, and everything falls back into place. One final touch before we move on to the fun part with VH, SVH, TVH and scroll locking. Let's just add some spacing around the second link group to separate it from the edge of the screen. So let's select the Navbar link group, add a vertical padding of 1.5 rems, and to match Webflow's menu exactly, add a top border. Let's just copy the color from one of the list item borders and add a 1 pixel top border using the same color. Before moving on, let's take a quick look at the other breakpoints to make sure our layout is fully responsive. We switch to the landscape breakpoint and at first glance, everything seems fine. But let's reduce the viewport width as much as possible. And right away, we see a problem. There isn't enough space to nicely display all three buttons inside the second Navbar link group. To solve this, we can go to the Style panel, scroll to Layout and enable Wrap. At first, this doesn't seem to do anything. That's because all three buttons have their flex child sizing set to grow if possible. This means they'll grow to fill the available space only if there's enough space. If not, they'll happily shrink to fit whatever space is available. So in our case, the buttons are not wrapping because they're trying to grow and flex grow is preventing them from dropping to the next line. To fix that, select one of the Navbar navlink elements with the combo class cc-button-mobile. Under flex child sizing, change grow if possible to shrink if needed. And do the same for the Navbar CTA button. And boom! One of the buttons dropped to a second row. This because shrink if needed means that the element will only take as much space as it needs, and shrink if necessary. But the layout is still a little messy. We want the first two buttons to be on the first row, equally sharing the available space. The third button, the Navbar CTA, to sit on the second row, filling it completely. To make this happen, we need to go deeper and manually set the flex grow value. So, once again, select one of the Navbar navlink elements with a combo class cc-button-mobile and let's click on the three dots in the flex child sizing section to reveal three new properties: grow, shrink, basis. Now, set grow to 1 and do the same for the Navbar CTA as well. So, by setting grow to 1, we allow each button to expand and share space equally within their row. The layout becomes much cleaner and more balanced. And it works beautifully, even in the portrait mobile breakpoint. At some screen sizes, the layout briefly rearranges itself so that one button takes a full row, the other two share the next row. But it only happens in very narrow viewports and honestly, that's totally acceptable. We're dealing with very limited screen real estate here, so there's no real need to complicate things further. The layout behaves well and we can consider it fully responsive. Which means we're finally ready to talk about VH, SVH and TVH and how to make sure our nav menu stays fully visible on all mobile devices. So what exactly is VH? VH stands for viewport height. It's a CSS unit that lets us express values based on the height of the browser's visible area. More precisely, 1 VH is equal to 1% of the viewport height. So 100 VH equals the entire visible height of the browser window. But what's a viewport? The viewport is the portion of the screen where the web page is rendered. Basically, what the user sees in their browser, excluding things like toolbars, tabs and system UI. So, if the viewport is 800 pixels tall, then 1 VH equals 8 pixels and 100 VH equals 800 pixels. But here's the problem and why this matters for our nav menu. In our project, we've set the height of the nav menu to calc 100 VH minus 3.5 REMs. This is meant to make the menu fill the entire screen, minus the height of the navbar at the top. But this doesn't always work correctly, especially on real mobile devices. Why? Because 100 VH doesn't take into account the browser UI, like the address bar at the top or the navigation bar at the bottom, on iOS and Android, for example. So what happens? When the mobile browser interface is fully visible, for example when you're not scrolling, part of your nav menu might get hidden behind those interface elements. Let me show you what I mean. We'll go back in our Webflow project, select the body element, and add a new section. Give it a class, and set its height to 300 VH. This gives us enough content to scroll. Now we select the navbar and set its position to fixed, and then we choose the option top, so it stays stuck at the top of the screen. Then we publish the project and open it on a real mobile device. Now, if we open the nav menu before scrolling, part of it gets cut off by the visible browser UI. But once we start scrolling, since the address bar shrinks and the bottom navigation bar disappears, the menu becomes fully visible. Why does this happen? Because the actual usable space changes dynamically, but VH doesn't adjust accordingly. So what's the fix? We need a more flexible unit, one that adapts to these changes. And that's where DVH, dynamic viewport height, comes into place. DVH adjusts in real time based on changes to the browser UI. It tracks the actual visible height of the viewport as it changes. So if toolbars appear or disappear, DVH updates automatically. And let's update our project. Select the nav menu, change the height calculation from calc 100 VH minus 3.5 REMs to calc 100 dVH minus 3.5 REMs. Publish the project again, and when we refresh the page and open the nav menu, nothing happens. Why? Because we've just changed the height of the nav menu, but that value was actually also inherited by the nav menu inner wrapper as well. Remember? We duplicated the nav menu class and assigned it to the inner wrapper. So, if we select the nav menu inner wrapper and inspect its height, we still see the unwanted VH unit there. So, since we can simply let the height of the nav menu be automatically determined by the content inside, we can fix the height of the inner wrapper and reset the one of the nav menu. And now, finally, we publish the project, open the nav menu, and it adapts dynamically. The menu is never cut off, and it always fills the correct space, regardless of the browser UI state. As we scroll and the address bar shrinks or disappears, the nav menu resizes itself accordingly. It's a small change, but it makes a huge difference for mobile usability. With that, this part is complete, and all that's left now is to remove the unnecessary hover interactions on mobile and add a small snippet of custom code taken from another video on my channel, link in the description, that locks the scroll when the menu is open, so the user can't scroll the page behind the menu. Let's now clean up the hover interactions, since we don't really have them on mobile. We'll start with the nav menu itself. If you remember, or we can just try it right now, hovering over the open nav menu changes the text color of all nav links and dropdowns from black to gray. That's not something we want anymore. So here's what we do. Select the nav menu, open the style selector dropdown, choose the hover state, and change the text color back from gray to dark black. That already fixes a good chunk of the issue. Now let's handle the individual components, starting with the navbar nav link. select the navbar navlink, and you'll notice there are still some transitions applied for smoother color changes. We don't need them anymore, so feel free to remove them. Then open the hover state and remove the box shadow that we had originally added to create the underline effect. Do the same for the drop-down toggle. In the normal state, remove both transitions and remove the leftover inner shadow. This was the one we had deleted from the navlinks earlier when we styled the mobile buttons. Then, in the hover state, remove the box shadow to disable the underline effect. Next, the navbar CTA. So let's select it, and in the normal state, remove the two transitions, then go to the hover state and remove the outer shadows, and reset the background color from dark blue to the default blue. And finally, the navbar brand. Select the navbar brand, go into the hover state and simply reset the text color from dark gray to dark black. And let's also remove the color transition from the normal state. Done. All the unnecessary hover effects are gone. Now there's just one last thing left to do. Let's look at how we can lock the scroll when the nav menu is open, so the user can't scroll the page behind it while navigating through the menu. To prevent the page from scrolling when the nav menu is open, we only need a tiny bit of custom CSS, literally just a few lines. Now, ideally, in a real project, you'd want this code to apply site-wide, since the navbar will likely be included on every single page. So the cleanest solution is click the Webflow logo in the top left corner of the designer, choose Site Settings, go to the Custom Code tab, paste the snippet into the head section. This way the code will apply to all pages, ensuring consistent behavior everywhere. Now, I want to stress it once again, this code comes from one of my previous YouTube videos and I'll paste a link to that tutorial in the description down below. That said, if you want even more control and you're turning your navbar into a component, you might prefer to keep the code within the component itself. So instead, go back to your project, select the navbar, press Ctrl or Command E and add an embed element. And let's paste our CSS code inside. Now, let's take a look at the code before saving. So what does this do? When the menu is open, it targets the body element and sets its overflow property to hidden. So it tells the browser, when the menu is open, disable scrolling on the entire page. So effectively, it freezes the page behind the menu. Now, save and close the embed, and let's rename it something like navbar_styles. And just to be tidy, if the embed wasn't placed inside the navbar, move it manually above the navbar main container. Let's test this now. We'll go to the section we previously created, the one with a height of 300 VH. And just to make things more obvious, let's throw in a rich text block and duplicate it a couple of times using Command or Ctrl D, just so there's visible scrollable content. Now publish the project. You can test this using Chrome's mobile view or on a real device. Reload the page, confirm that the page scrolls normally. You should see the scroll bar on the right, and scroll down until heading 1 is at the bottom of the page. Now open the nav menu, try scrolling, and looks like nothing happens. We don't even have a scroll bar and the page seems locked. And if we close the nav menu, the page is exactly where we left, but we can now keep scrolling as usual. So perfect, that's exactly what we wanted. Now for a sanity check, let's remove the CSS. So delete the embed, publish the site again, refresh the page, and try it again. Scroll down, then as we open the nav menu, this time we'll notice that the scroll bar is still there, so it looks like we can scroll behind the menu, and indeed, if we close the nav menu, we can see the scroll position of the page has changed. So yes, looks like the code is doing its job. Now let's undo the deletion with Command or Ctrl Z, publish one last time, and we're back in business. Now every time the menu is opened, scroll is disabled, and everything feels way smoother. This concludes the second episode of our series. In the next one, we'll start building the mega menu for the desktop breakpoint. After that, we'll make it fully responsive, and finally, we'll add some custom animations, including the open-close icon transition you see on Webflow's site. But now, it's time for a recap. And that's it for today's tutorial. You've just learned how to take the desktop navbar structure from our first episode and turn it into a fully responsive, mobile-friendly navigation system in Webflow. We talked about dropdowns, spacing, mobile layout tricks, and even dove into those tricky viewport units like VH and DVH to make sure everything behaves properly across devices. And to top it all off, we added a little touch of professionalism with a tiny CSS snippet that blocks page scroll when the nav menu is open. Just like the cool kids do. Everything you saw today is part of a fully clonable Webflow project, so feel free to play around, make changes, and use it as a base for your own websites. And if you enjoyed this breakdown and want to keep building with me, stick around for the next episode, where we'll finally start working on the mega menu. Until then, stay creative, stay curious, and if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Webflow tips and tricks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Matane!